My name is Virginia Reeves. I'm 31 years old, and for 11 years, my parents made sure every moment that was supposed to belong to me didn't. It started small. A forgotten birthday dinner. A graduation they couldn't make. But then it grew into something darker. Something deliberate. My milestones didn't just get ignored, they were overshadowed, twisted, or quietly destroyed. And the worst part, they always smiled while doing it. Like it was normal. Like I was the problem for expecting anything else. I grew up in a modest house just outside Columbus, where everything revolved around one person, my younger brother, Caleb. He was the golden child. The one my parents praised, protected, and proudly paraded in front of everyone. Meanwhile, I was the background noise. The daughter who was doing fine, which, in their language, meant I didn't deserve attention. I still remember my high school graduation. I stood on that stage, scanning the crowd, heart pounding, searching for their faces. I spotted them, but they weren't looking at me. They were laughing with Caleb, who had shown up late and somehow turned the moment into his own entrance. Afterward, my mom hugged him first. "You look so handsome today," she said. I stood there, cap still on my head, diploma in my hand, invisible. College wasn't any different. When I got accepted into a competitive program, I called them excited, breathless. My dad paused for a second, then said, "That's nice. But did you hear Caleb got scouted for baseball?" That was it. My achievement became a footnote in his story. I hung up that day feeling something inside me crack. Quietly, but permanently. By the time I was 25, I stopped expecting anything. I celebrated alone. Promotions, birthdays, even buying my first apartment, I did it all quietly. No calls, no invitations. Because I knew if I involved them, they'd find a way to ruin it. Or worse, make it about Caleb again. It wasn't just neglect anymore. It felt intentional. And yet, a part of me still hoped. That part of me came back when I met Daniel. He was calm, kind, and annoyingly patient. The kind of man who listened when I spoke, who noticed when I went quiet, who didn't let things slide when something felt wrong. "Your family doesn't treat you right," he said once, gently. I shrugged it off. It's just how they are. But deep down, I knew he was right. When Daniel proposed, it was simple and perfect. No crowd, no noise. Just us, standing by the lake at sunset. My hands were shaking when I said yes, not just because I loved him, but because I knew what came next. The moment I told my parents, they'd be involved. And history had already shown me what that meant. Still, I told them. My mom's voice lit up on the phone. "An engagement party?" She said immediately. "We have to celebrate this properly." My stomach tightened. That word properly never meant anything good when it came from her. But I forced a smile into my voice. "Sure," I said. "Let's do it." The planning started quickly. Too quickly. My mom insisted on handling everything, the guest list, the venue, the decorations. "You just relax," she kept saying. "This is your moment." But something about her tone, it didn't feel like she meant it. It felt rehearsed, controlled. Then came the first red flag. I asked to see the guest list. She hesitated. "It's mostly family and close friends," she said casually. "And some of Caleb's connections. You know, to make it lively." My chest tightened. "Why Caleb's connections?" I asked. She laughed softly. "Oh, Virginia, don't be so sensitive. It's a party." "A party?" "Not my engagement." "A party." That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall, that familiar feeling creeping back in. The one I had buried for years. The feeling that something was being taken from me again. Quietly, carefully, like it always had been. Daniel noticed, of course. He always did. "Talk to me," he said, sitting beside me. I shook my head at first. "It's nothing." But he didn't move. He just waited. And eventually, I broke. "They're going to ruin this," I whispered. "I know they are." He didn't try to convince me otherwise. Instead, he asked something unexpected. "Then why are you letting them?" That question, it stayed with me for days. Because for the first time, I realized maybe this didn't have to end the same way. Maybe this time, I didn't have to stand there quietly while they took another moment from me. Maybe this time, I could let them think they were in control and then take it back. But I needed proof, not just for myself, but for everyone else. Because for 11 years, they had hidden behind smiles, behind charm, behind carefully crafted lies. To the outside world, they were loving parents, supportive, proud. No one saw what happened behind closed doors. No one except me. And I was done being the only one who knew. The engagement party was set for a Saturday evening. 107 guests. A number my mom kept repeating proudly, like it was some kind of achievement. "It's going to be unforgettable," she said. Oh, it would be, just not in the way she expected. Because for the first time in 11 years, I wasn't going to let them ruin my milestone. I was going to expose them in front of everyone. The week leading up to the engagement party felt like walking through a storm I couldn't see, but could feel in my bones. My mom called constantly, updating me on decorations, catering, seating arrangements, but never once asked what I wanted. "Trust me, Virginia, it's all taken care of," she kept saying, her voice sugar-sweet and suffocating. I nodded along, even though she couldn't see me, gripping my phone tighter each time. Because I had stopped arguing. Not out of weakness, but because I had started watching. I began noticing patterns I had ignored for years. The way she avoided direct answers. The way my dad stayed quiet in the background, only stepping in when something needed to be finalized. And Caleb, he suddenly became very involved. Too involved. I invited a few important people. He told me one evening, like he was doing me a favor. I forced a smile. "Important for who?" I asked. He chuckled. "For the family." That word again, family. It never seemed to include me. Daniel watched it all unfold with a calm that both comforted and unsettled me. One night, he placed a small box on the table between us. "Open it," he said. Inside was a discreet recording device. I looked at him, confused. "If you're right about them," he said quietly, "then let them show their truth." In their own words. My heart pounded as I held it. It felt like crossing a line. But then I remembered every ruined moment. Every silent heartbreak. And I nodded. From that day on, I stopped being their daughter and became their witness. I visited my parents' house twice before the party, each time pretending to be the same quiet, agreeable Virginia they were used to. But this time, I listened more than I spoke. I asked harmless questions, let conversations stretch longer than usual. And slowly, things began to slip. My mom, sipping her tea, laughed one afternoon and said, "Honestly, this party is a great opportunity for Caleb. So many of our connections will be there." I kept my voice steady. "It's my engagement party." She waved her hand dismissively. "Of course, sweetheart. But we can all benefit, right?" That sentence echoed in my mind long after I left. The second visit was worse. I walked into the living room and heard Caleb and my dad talking before they noticed me. "You think she suspects anything?" Caleb asked. My dad sighed. "Virginia never questions things. That's her nature." They both laughed softly, like it was a joke. Like I was a joke. I stepped into the room, forcing a smile. "What's funny?" I asked. Caleb didn't miss a beat. "Just talking about how perfect your party is going to be." Perfect. The word felt like poison. That night, I sat in my car outside my apartment for nearly 20 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart racing. I wasn't imagining it anymore. This wasn't just neglect. It was strategy. They were using my engagement, my moment, to elevate Caleb, Again, always Caleb. And for the first time, the anger outweighed the hurt. I went upstairs, walked straight to Daniel, and placed the recorder on the table. "I have enough," I said. He looked at me carefully. "Enough for what?" I took a deep breath, my voice steady in a way it had never been before. Enough to make sure they never do this to me again. The plan started forming that night. Not out of revenge, but out of necessity. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want to create a scene. I wanted something far more powerful truth. Raw, undeniable truth. The kind that couldn't be explained away with smiles or excuses. The kind that would make 107 people see exactly who my parents really were, without me saying a single word. So I played along. I agreed with everything. I thanked my mom for her effort. I even let Caleb brag about the guest list without pushing back. Because the more comfortable they felt, the more careless they became. And every careless word, every dismissive comment, every quiet confession, it was all being captured, piece by piece, like a story finally telling itself. But the hardest part wasn't collecting the truth. It was waiting for the night when everything would come to light, waiting while pretending nothing was wrong, smiling through conversations that felt like knives, standing beside people who had spent 11 years breaking me, while they believed I was still too blind to see it. The day before the party, my mom called again. "Everything is ready," she said, her voice glowing with excitement. "This is going to be the most memorable night of your life." I closed my eyes for a second, letting her words settle. She was right. It would be memorable, just not for the reason she thought. Because for the first time, I wasn't walking into a moment they controlled. I was walking into a moment I had built, quietly, carefully, and completely on my own terms. And this time, everyone would be watching. The night of the engagement party arrived with a strange kind of silence inside me, the kind that comes before something breaks. The venue was glowing soft golden lights, polished tables, and a crowd already forming when Daniel and I stepped in. 107 guests, just like my mom had proudly promised. Laughter filled the room, glasses clinked, and for a moment, it looked perfect. Too perfect. I stood there, scanning the faces, realizing how many of them believed this was a celebration of me, when in reality, it had never been. My mom rushed toward us, arms wide, her smile bright and practiced. "There she is," she announced loudly, drawing attention. People turned, clapping softly, some cheering. I forced a smile as she hugged me, her grip tighter than necessary. "You look beautiful," she whispered, then pulled back and added, "Stay close tonight, okay? We have a schedule." A schedule. For my engagement. I nodded, playing my part well inside. I felt that old familiar weight pressing against my chest. Caleb appeared moments later, dressed sharper than I had ever seen him. He shook Daniel's hand confidently, then leaned toward me. "Big night," he said with a smirk. "Don't mess it up." I held his gaze for a second longer than usual, something shifting quietly behind my eyes. "I won't," I replied. And for the first time, I meant something completely different than what he assumed. As the evening unfolded, I noticed exactly what I had expected. And somehow it still hurt. Conversations kept circling back to Caleb, his career, his connections, his bright future. At one point, I stood beside a group of guests while my dad proudly introduced him. "This is my son," he said, placing a firm hand on Caleb's shoulder. "He's the one to watch." No mention of me. Not even at my own engagement party. I felt Daniel's hand gently squeeze mine, grounding me before I could drift too far into that familiar emptiness. Dinner was served, speeches began, and I watched as my parents took control of the room like they always did. My mom stood first, tapping her glass lightly. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice warm and polished. "Tonight is about family, about love, and about celebrating the people who make us proud. I almost laughed at the irony. Then she turned toward Caleb. And of course, a special mention to my son, who continues to exceed our expectations every single day. Applause filled the room. I sat there perfectly still, as if I had disappeared again. Then my dad stood up, adjusting his jacket, clearing his throat. Virginia has always been independent, he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. She's done well for herself. That was it. A single line, followed by another long praise about Caleb's achievements, his discipline, his future. I could feel eyes shifting, some confused, some uncomfortable, but no one said anything. No one ever did. And in that moment, something inside me didn't break. It settled because I realized this was exactly what I needed. Not a hidden truth, a public one. Daniel leaned closer, his voice low. "Are you ready?" he asked. I took a slow breath, my eyes fixed on the room, on the people who had only ever seen one version of my family. "Yes," I whispered. The music softened, conversations dipped, and my mom signaled for the next part of the evening. "Now," she said brightly, "we'd love for Virginia to say a few words." Her tone carried that same quiet confidence. The belief that I would say something small, polite, forgettable. Just like always. I stood up slowly, smoothing my dress, feeling every heartbeat echo through my chest. 107 people turned toward me, watching, waiting, expecting the same quiet girl they thought they knew. I took the microphone from my mom's hand, our fingers brushing for a brief second. She smiled at me unaware, completely unaware of what was about to happen. I looked out at the crowd, my voice calm, steady, almost too steady. "Thank you all for being here," I began. "It really means a lot to have so many people gathered for such an important moment in my life." A few nods, soft smiles. I paused, letting the silence stretch just enough to feel intentional. Then I continued. "But before I say anything else, I want to share something with all of you." I saw it then, the first flicker of confusion on my mom's face, the slight shift in my dad's posture, Caleb's smirk, fading just a little. And for the first time in 11 years, they didn't know what was coming next. I held the microphone a little tighter, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make people lean in. "For 11 years, I said slowly, my voice steady but heavy. "Every milestone in my life has been redirected." A soft murmur rippled through the room. My mom's smile stiffened, her eyes narrowing just slightly. I continued before anyone could interrupt. Birthdays, graduations, promotions, even this engagement. Somehow, they always became about someone else. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth carried itself. My dad stepped forward quickly, forcing a chuckle. "Virginia, sweetheart, maybe we should." I lifted my hand gently, stopping him without even looking. "Please," I said calmly. "Just a few minutes. I've waited 11 years for them." That line landed harder than anything else. The room went completely still. You could feel the shift now. Curiosity turning into tension. I glanced at Daniel for a brief second. He gave me a small nod. That was all I needed. "I used to think I was overreacting," I continued, my eyes scanning the crowd. "That maybe I was just too sensitive. That maybe this is what normal families look like." A few people exchanged uncomfortable glances. My mom shook her head slightly, whispering under her breath, "What are you doing?" I ignored her, but then I started listening more carefully, paying attention. And what I found wasn't just hurt. It was intention. That word hit the room like a drop of cold water. I reached into my bag slowly, pulling out my phone, connecting it to the sound system Daniel had quietly arranged earlier. My hands didn't shake. Not anymore. "I don't want to tell you who my parents are," I said softly. "I want you to hear them." A few confused voices murmured, but no one moved. Everyone was watching now, completely locked in. Then I pressed play. My mom's voice filled the room first, clear and unmistakable. Honestly, this party is a great opportunity for Caleb. So many of our connections will be there. A sharp gasp came from somewhere in the crowd. I saw my mom's face drain of color instantly. "Turn that off," she whispered urgently, stepping toward me. But I didn't move. The next recording played. Caleb's voice this time, casual, almost amused. "You think she suspects anything?" Then my dad, calm and dismissive. "Virginia never questions things. That's her nature." Laughter followed. Their laughter? It echoed through the speakers, louder than it ever had in real life. Because now it wasn't private anymore. It was exposed. No, this is taken out of context. My dad snapped, his voice rising for the first time. But it was too late. The room had already changed. People weren't just listening anymore. They were understanding. I could see it in their faces, the realization, the discomfort, the quiet judgment settling in. I let one more clip play. My mom again, lighter this time, almost joking. "Of course, it's her engagement, but we can all benefit, right?" Silence followed. Heavy, suffocating silence. No music, no chatter. Just the sound of truth hanging in the air where lies used to live. I lowered the phone slowly. "For 11 years, I said, my voice softer now, but stronger than ever. I kept quiet. I let it happen. I convinced myself it wasn't worth fighting. I looked directly at my parents for the first time that night. But this was my moment. And I wasn't going to let it be taken from me again. My mom looked like she might cry, but not from guilt. From exposure. My dad stood frozen, his composure completely shattered. And Caleb? For once, he had nothing to say. No smirk, no confidence. Just silence. I turned back to the guests. "I didn't do this to embarrass them," I continued. "I did this so I could finally stop disappearing." My voice cracked slightly on that last word, but I didn't look away. Because the truth is, I was never invisible. I was just surrounded by people who refused to see me. No one clapped. No one spoke. But something had shifted in that room. Something permanent. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one standing small. They were. For a few seconds after the recordings ended, no one moved. Like the entire room had forgotten how to breathe. Then the whispers began low and scattered at first, before spreading like a quiet wave through all 107 guests. I saw people glance at my parents, then back at me, their expressions shifting from confusion to something much clearer. Recognition. Not of me, but of the truth they had just heard. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. I hadn't just exposed them. I had finally been seen. My mom was the first to break. "Virginia, this is not how you handle family matters," she said, her voice trembling but still trying to hold authority. I looked at her calmly, the weight of 11 years sitting behind my eyes. "No," I replied softly. "This is how I stop them." My dad stepped forward, anger replacing his earlier shock. "You've embarrassed us in front of everyone." He snapped. I didn't flinch this time. "No," I said again, my voice firmer. "You did that yourselves." I just stopped protecting it. Caleb finally spoke, his tone sharper than I had ever heard it. "You really did all this for attention?" he said, shaking his head. For a second, the old version of me almost reacted, almost shrank, but that version didn't exist anymore. I met his gaze without hesitation. "No," I said quietly. "I did this because, for once, I wanted the truth to be louder than you." That landed harder than any insult ever could. He looked away first. Around us, the energy had completely shifted. A few guests quietly stepped back from my parents, creating a distance that hadn't been there before. Others avoided eye contact with them altogether, but some looked at me with something unexpected. Respect, not loud, not dramatic. Just a quiet understanding. And somehow, that meant more than applause ever could. Daniel stepped beside me then, his presence steady and warm, his hand finding mine without a word. I squeezed it gently, grounding myself in something real, something safe. "You okay?" he whispered. I took a slow breath, looking around one last time at the room that was supposed to be taken from me. "Yeah," I said. And for the first time, I actually meant it. The rest of the night didn't fall apart the way I once feared it would. It transformed. Conversations became softer, more genuine. People came up to me not with pity, but with honesty. A few even apologized for things they hadn't done, but had unknowingly supported by staying silent. My parents left early. No dramatic exit. No final words. Just quiet and heavy footsteps fading into the night. Later, as the lights dimmed and the crowd slowly thinned, I stood in the center of the room, taking it all in. The decorations, the laughter that had returned, the life that still existed in this moment. My moment, and I realized something I had never truly understood before. Closure doesn't come from them changing. It comes from you refusing to accept what hurt you ever again. I leaned my head lightly against Daniel's shoulder, watching the last few guests leave. "Do you regret it?" he asked gently. I thought about it for a second, about the years of silence, the fear, the doubt. Then I shook my head. "No," I said. "I regret waiting this long. Because the truth is, some people don't ruin your milestones because they hate you. They do it because they think you'll never stand up and stop them. And maybe for 11 years, they were right, but not anymore."